So when I look in here and I have 4 sine theta, when you see these types of graphs, a lot of times when they give you something in theta, if they say theta, that's going to kind of tip you off that it's degrees if they don't already tell you it's degrees. And if you just see an X, that's going to tell you that you're probably graphing in radians. So this one we're going to graph here in degrees. So when I think about this, we have now multiplied our trig function by 4. So my theta, or my X value, again we're doing this in degrees, I'm going to still be using those special border angles that we just keep seeing. And when I go ahead and I find these values, remember, I'm going to take the sine of theta, or the sine of 0 in this case, and that's 0, but I'm going to times it by 4, which gives me 0. I'm going to do the same thing for all these other guys. So I'm going to take 4 and times it by all of these sine values, which would give me 4 times 1 is 4. And I have 4 times 0 is 0. I have 4 times negative 1 is a negative 4. And then I have 4 times 0 is 0 again. So I'm going to take those points, graph them. I have 0, 90, 180, 270. Did I lose one? No, I didn't. Okay, I got this. Okay, and then I'm going to plot those points. Oh, but first of all, I need to figure out where my high and low are. Okay, so my highest point on here is 4. My lowest point is negative 4. So at 0, I'm at 0. At 90, I'm at 4. 180, 0. 270, negative 4. 360, at 0 again. Connect my dots. Ooh. That was good. I'm getting better at this. And so when you look here, you notice that nothing really changed about this graph. I still have the same cycle length, so it's still the period is 360, but now my amplitude has changed. If I look in here, my amplitude is now 4. The distance from that middle line, the sinusoidal axis, down to a high point or a low point would be 4. So when you are multiplying a number on the outside, for instance, we'll call it A, whether it's sine or whether it's cosine, well, that's a theta, you are going to be affecting your amplitude. So A affects your amplitude, or how high or low your graph goes. So outside affects amplitude. Let's see what happens when we multiply something on the inside. If you notice here, this guy is still in theta, so I'm still going to be doing degrees. And so I need to have theta and then the sine of 3 theta. Okay, it's kind of confusing for me, so what I'm going to do is draw an extra little chart over here. So if I have my 3 theta, that's going to be one of my critical points. So those critical points that I care about, that I can find pretty easily, are 0, 90, 180, 270, and 360. So if I was to find the sine of those values, that would just be my 1, my 0, my negative 1, my 0, and my positive 1. Okay? Is it really? Oh, it's cosine. That's why. I was like, no, that's wrong. I wrote the wrong thing over here. Okay, cosine. But when I'm looking here, when I graph my theta on my graph, when I'm trying to find those critical points so I know where I'm going to have to divide that by 3. So I'm going to have 0, and then I'm going to have 30, and 60, and 90, and 120. So the points I'm actually plotting here on my x-axis are going to be 30, 60, 90, and 120, because that's going to get me that cosine of 3 theta. So when I look here, my biggest y value is 1, my lowest y value is negative 1. I'm at 0, 1. Then I'm at 30, 0. We're at 60, negative 1, 90, 0, and 120, 1. And then I connect my dots on a curve. Ooh, okay. And so you see here, my amplitude didn't change. I look here, my amplitude is still 1 from that regular parent function. However, what did change is my period. My cycle, where it started and restarted, it now changed from the 360 and it went down into 120. So when I look here, my period is going to be 120 degrees. So whenever I have something that says multiply on the inside. So y equals sine of b times theta. I'm being really creative tonight. Y equals cosine of b times theta to right there. B affects your cycle length, or affects your period. Okay, and so if we wanted to find the period, if I knew that number in the middle there, all I have to do is take the number of degrees in a full rotation or a full cycle of my graph and divide it by that b value, or in the case of radians, I'd take 2 pi divided by b. Okay, put a big old box around that. That's an important fact. So if you want to find how many degrees you're going to have to go to make a full cycle, you take the full thing and divide it by whatever number is multiplied by your variable on the inside of your trig function. Okay, now if you were looking for what are these values that go right here, because we like those critical points because it kind of gives me an idea of where do I start. Remember, your sine function, if you look back at your sine function, it starts at a high, or sorry, it starts at a middle point, then it goes to a high, goes back to middle, then it goes to low. Okay, so sine has that graph that starts and then goes down. Okay, whereas cosine, you know that it starts up at a high point, goes to a middle, and then goes to a low. So it goes down like that. So critical points, if you want to figure out where those values are going to be, all you have to do is take your period, whatever you found your period to be, and divide it by 4, because there's always 4 values in between there where you have a middle, a low, a middle, a high, or for whatever your cosine or sine function is. So if you take your period divided by your 4, you can find that. Okay, I know this video is running a little bit long, but I want to go through one more example that kind of skips the drawing of the XY chart and takes into account the period, the amplitude, and to find those critical points. So I'm going to graph 2 cycles. I'll make a note. I want to graph 2 cycles of this just to get an idea of y equals 8 times sine 1/2 x. Remember, if I have x, then I'm going to try to graph this in radians. Ooh. Okay, so remember, this is our general rule. The a and the b are going to tell us what changes here. So my a value on the outside is my amplitude value. That's what we saw when we multiplied on the outside. It changed how tall my graph was. And in this case, my amplitude is 8. Okay, so that's going to tell me that all of my high-low points are going to be 8 or negative 8. Okay, so that's my A value. I found my amplitude. So then my B is 1/2. I'm using Christmas colors today. Okay, B tells you your period. So if I wanted to find my period length, I'm going to take a full cycle, which is 2 pi, and then I'm going to divide it by whatever number is b. So b is 1/2 in this case. We've got some tricky fractions going on in here. Remember, you keep the first, you change the sign, you flip over the second, and you find out that 1 full period is going to happen every 4 pi radians. So what this is telling you is that your cycle or your period is 4 pi long. So it keeps going for that long. So when I look at this, I can go ahead and label some points. I know my high point is 8. I know my low point is negative 8. Then I have my my period here. But I need to know a full cycle is going to go from 0 to 4 pi. But I need to know where are those critical points in between. So to find those critical points, I'm going to take my period, which we just said was 4 pi, and divide it by 4 because there's 4 critical points in between on each of these, which tells me that I'm going to have some sort of special value, so a mid, a high, a mid, etc. every pi radians. So now I can label my graph. I know that I'm going to have each of my points will be pi, then 2 pi, then 3 pi. It did tell me to do 2 cycles, so I'm going to go ahead and keep labeling until I get to 2 cycles, which will be 8 pi. Now I'm going to graph my points. Now the one thing to remember is that sine is the one that starts in the middle, so it starts at 0, then it goes up to a high, goes back down, goes down to the bottom. Now this is one full cycle. Okay, but they asked me to graph 2, so I'm just going to continue. Goes back up, middle, low, middle, and then you connect your dots. Oh, wow. Struggling. Okay. So I hope you had a great weekend, or that you will have a great weekend. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask, and I will see you on Monday.